Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another CU RMACC webinar. Today's topic is overview of CU's approved AI tools. And some of our colleagues from the Office of Information Technology here at the University of Colorado Boulder will be demoing the following tools. We have Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, NotebookLM, Zoom AI, and ChatGPT EDU. Connor Walladay, who is our AI program manager here at CU Boulder, is going to introduce his team.
Thank you so much, Casey. Hi, everybody. Thank you to the RMAC and NAIR team for having all of us today. I'm just going to give a couple of quick introductions here, and then we'll dive into the overview. Feel free to give me a shout out if the screen sharing is not working as it should. We have 5 of us folks from OIT at CU Boulder here to talk about different tools. I'll be talking about Google's NotebookLM tool about halfway through the presentation. We have Tim Crean here to talk about Microsoft's Copilot and M365 Copilot tools. We have Nick Steinkamp coming to talk about Zoom's AI features. We have Joel Krieger to talk about the Gemini access that we have on our campus. And then we have Shane Miller joining to discuss ChatGPT EDU, which is recently announced, and we have limited information about it, but we'll be trying to address a little bit of what we know so far. So thank you for everyone that's joining from CU Boulder as well as peer institutions. Just a little overview of our agenda and how we're covering these tools. Like Casey mentioned, we're covering 5 general purpose tools. At least for CU Boulder, these are not 100% of our tools that use AI that you have access to on campus, but they are some of our most general purpose and broadly available tools. All of these tools are available to faculty, staff, and students at CU Boulder. And these are the tools that we get the most questions about what their capabilities are and where to use one tool versus the other for a certain task. So we'll be covering each tool one at a time, and we'll be talking about data considerations, the capabilities and functionalities in the tools currently, how to access the tools from CU Boulder, and potentially some future roadmap functionalities if we know that they are coming up here soon. And then, as Casey mentioned, we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So either write down your questions if you have a specific question for one of us that's presenting, or feel free to throw it into the Q&A in the Zoom functionality, and we'll get to that after we do all the presentations. And if you're from CU Boulder and you have a specific question and you don't get to ask it in this presentation, feel free to email oithelp@colorado.edu with any follow-up questions, and we can be sure to get back to you about that. So with that said, I'll stop screen sharing and then I will pass on to Tim to talk about Copilot.
Great. Thanks so much, Connor. Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here today. I'm just going to go ahead and share. And I am on a Mac, so let me know if you all are seeing the right view. Perfect. Okay, so I'm here today to talk about Copilot Chat and Microsoft 365 Copilot. So these are the 2 flavors of Microsoft Copilot that are currently offered to Microsoft 365 users. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that Copilot can be, it differs a little bit from some of the other AI tools we offer on campus. The first thing I think that's really important to understand is that Copilot in and of itself is not a large language model. Microsoft, has a partnership with OpenAI, and so what they've done is they've created Copilot, which they call an orchestration layer. So essentially, it's a set of features that uses OpenAI's GPT-5 and GPT-5.2 models as the large language model. And then Copilot offers other features on top of that and integrates with other Microsoft Office 365 tools to kind of like increase the the discoverability, increase the accuracy of prompts that you ask of Copilot. A couple of really important things I think to understand is that data is not shared with OpenAI. The models are actually run in Microsoft's data centers. So the reason that's really important is that Microsoft has security and privacy guarantees called enterprise data protection. And because they're running these in their own data centers, they're able to provide these guarantees about what they'll do with the data or what they won't do with the data, how they use your prompts and your responses. And the key thing there is that it's not shared with OpenAI. Another interesting, this is relatively recent, but Copilot is starting to offer Anthropic Claude models. It's currently only available in Excel online, I believe, but they are starting to roll that out as what they call a sub-processor. And the nice thing about that is that the same data protection agreement that we have with the OpenAI models will now also apply to the Anthropic models. So Copilot integrates with the Microsoft tools that we all use every day, all the Office tools, Microsoft Teams, Outlook. And then if you do have the additional Microsoft 365 Copilot license that's available to faculty and staff at CU Boulder, then Copilot has access to any Microsoft 365 data. So think files, chats, emails. So anything that you as a user of Copilot would have access to, Copilot is going to be able to respond to your prompts and use that data that you have access to. In addition to that, Copilot is aware of the activity and relationships between people, the meetings they have, and the data that they use. And that really helps increase relevancy and accuracy. So when you're asking questions of your data, it's able to be aware of, okay, who are you working with? Who was in this meeting? Who's on this project? That kind of information. And then finally, Copilot is one of the CU AI tools approved for data that is up to the confidential level. So we created this quick table just to kind of give some of the key differences between Copilot Chat, which is available to everybody at CU Boulder, versus the Microsoft 365 Copilot that requires a license. So in terms of cost, Copilot Chat, no additional cost. Microsoft 365, there is an additional license required, and there's an approval process for that. Who can get it? Students, faculty, and staff can get, or all have Copilot Chat. For the Microsoft 365 Copilot, faculty and staff can request a license. We already talked about the data protection, so this is a link. Casey will be able to share this slide deck, and this is a link to Microsoft's data protection agreement that kind of highlights how what they'll do with our data and what their agreements are. Approved for confidential data classification for both of those. In terms of what they're best for, Copilot Chat is probably best for just kind of general purpose AI, where you're asking questions about a document that you uploaded, or maybe you're just asking a question about general knowledge that's available on the web. And then Microsoft 365 Copilot really brings that integration into the Microsoft 365 apps and the awareness of the data that you're working with and the people that you're working with. In terms of file interaction, Copilot Chat is only able to answer questions about files that you upload, or for example, if you were in Office online, so you had Word online and you opened up a document, you could use Copilot to ask questions and, help you write a document in Word. Whereas with the Microsoft 365 Copilot license, it's all grounded in the files that you have access to. So you don't necessarily have to upload a file. You could just reference the file because it's aware of the files you have access to. We do have some advanced model access. As I mentioned, we have ChatGPT 5 and 5.2, and Anthropic's Claude is coming right now to Excel. And then finally, in terms of API access, there's currently no API access for either Copilot Chat or Microsoft 365 Copilot. So the basics, using Copilot Chat, Microsoft has made this fairly easy. They've essentially made the Microsoft 365 landing page is Copilot. So when you go to Microsoft365.com in a browser, it's gonna land you on the chat for Copilot. There's also a Copilot app for both Windows and Mac. The interface is exactly the same as the browser, so the app is really just kind of like referencing the web page and kind of showing you the same thing. But it can be kind of nice to have a separate app instead of having to go to a browser tab. So if you're looking to use Copilot, or a current user, and you're not aware that that app is available, I highly recommend that. It's very useful. And Copilot Chat, this is relatively new, probably in the last 3 months or so. So initially, the licensed version was the only one that was available if you went to like Outlook, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. Now the Copilot Chat that doesn't require an extra cost, you can actually see it in Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and use it with a document that you have open. Okay, and using Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this is a link to the license request process from OIT Software and Licensing. So faculty and staff can go to this link and request Microsoft 365 Copilot licensing. I think we have about 450 or so users on campus right now who have requested that and are using it. And same as Copilot Chat, you can use Copilot in a browser or in the Copilot app. Again, the key difference is just the awareness that access to all the data that a user can access across all Microsoft 365 services. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen on this one. I just wanted to highlight some tips that are really useful for working with Copilot. So I'm just going to go ahead and share screen. Okay, so Copilot personalization, custom instruction, and
Hey,
saved
Tim,
memories. Yeah,
we're still just seeing your slides, like the PowerPoint
yeah,
slides. Okay.
yeah. I'm going to be moving between this slide
Okay, great.
and a demo of the points that are on the slide. Yep.
Okay.
So let's talk about personalization, custom instructions, saved memories first. So if you're in Copilot and you go up to settings, there's an option up here for personalization. And then there's two main things I wanted to point out. The first one's custom instructions. So this is where you can tell Copilot about yourself. And the type of communication style you like, the types of outputs that you like, bulleted lists, summaries, executive summaries, that kind of thing. You can see down here, it kind of gives you some recommendations about the types of things you might want to put into your custom instructions. So for me, I just kind of put in, what's my job? What are my values? What kind of tone do I like to use? And then, I put in a little bit more down at the bottom about how, when I ask questions specific to some complicated IT um, uh, process or command, that IT changes a lot. So I want Copilot to like double check that it's giving me the most accurate information that it can. The second thing is saved memories. So these are kind of neat. They're similar to custom instructions, but you can say things like, say Copilot comes back with something and the tone isn't correct, you can actually say, hey, Copilot, remember that I prefer concise, executive-ready summaries, that kind of thing. So you're just reminding Copilot if it's not doing what you want it to do, you can just say that, and it'll actually store it as a memory, and then then you can kind of like ask the question again and say, okay, did it remember this? Did it do a better job of personalizing that for me? Choosing an AI model. So this is something a lot of folks aren't aware of, but right up here in the dropdown where it says auto, you can actually choose the different models. So automatic just lets Copilot decide which model it's going to use based on the question you've asked it. But you can set it if you just want really fast responses. You could say quick responses. If you wanted to think a little bit deeper, you can say think deeper. And then the newer models, 5.2, and also have the quick response and the think deeper option. So if you wanted to try out those newer models, you can do that as well. Okay, Outlook draft instructions and prioritize inbox. I thought this was something that was worth looking at. So basically within the settings in Outlook, you can go down to Copilot. The first thing I'll point out is that if you don't like having every time you start a new email and you don't like to see that Copilot prompt in the email, you can turn it off in Outlook right now. But the two things I wanted to kind of highlight are prioritize and draft instructions. So you can choose to let Copilot prioritize your email, kind of go through. You can choose to have summaries at the top of the of your messages for those emails that it prioritizes. And you can set priorities. So for example, I've got here, if anything comes in from my manager or a couple other people in OIT, I want that to be prioritized. Anything related to this topic, I want to be prioritized. And then in lower priority, I said, social media or vendor emails that aren't from Microsoft, you can set those as lower priority. And then draft instructions. So this is it's a little bit like the personalization that we looked at, but it's very specific to Outlook. So when Outlook tries to help you write an email, you can go in and create these, very detailed instructions about the type of communication you want, who the audience is that you're working with, and other things that are kind of relevant to how you like to communicate with people. Prompt gallery. So prompt gallery is available in Outlook. If you go down towards the bottom, you'll see this option here. And this is really nice because it lets you, if there are prompts that you use on daily or weekly basis, you can save them for later use to get at them as quickly as you can. And then this is my favorite feature in Copilot. So whenever you ask Copilot a question, you get the option to save that question or that prompt as a scheduled prompt. So here's an example right here. This is a prompt to help me get ready for one-on-ones with my manager. And so you can see here it's pretty detailed. I want to look back at all emails, chats, summarize key activities and topics, go through meeting notes, recordings where Shane and I were both participants. And then I can set that, on the day that I typically have my one-on-one, I can set that in the morning and be more prepared for that. So the way to do that is whenever you do a prompt, you'll see schedule this prompt up at the top, and you can go ahead and schedule it and say, when you want to run weekly, daily. It does limit it to 15 times. And I think this is actually good because we don't want these things created and just running and using energy if we're not actually using them. So this almost forces you to go in, say, is this working for me? And if it is working for you and you're using it, you can go ahead and set it back up again and set it to run another 15 times. You can also receive an email when the responses are ready. So you'll come in the morning in your inbox, it'll be there saying your scheduled task is run. Saving Copilot responses. You've got a couple options when you get a response. If you wanted to start working on it, the first one is add it to a page. So you can just go ahead and edit it in a page, and it'll basically just put it on a page that you could then share with other people. You could all be in there kind of working on it together. The other option you'll have is to save it as a Word doc or export it as a Word doc. Or if you just want to kind of hear an audio version of it, you can click on read aloud and it'll play the answer back for you.
Tim, sorry
Yep.
to interrupt, but
Yep.
we had a request if you could magnify that last slide a little bit.
This slide here?
The one before that.
This one.
I think so.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, hopefully that's better. So yeah, so the options are, edit it in Pages, which opens it up in a shareable page that you can work with people on, or read aloud, or export to Word. So just kind of ways to take a response and start working with your team on it relatively quickly. Okay, two more things, and then I'm gonna sign off. So we've got Prompt Coach Agent. This is a really neat feature. So it's an agent that's created by Microsoft. It's right here. You can see it, Prompt Coach. And essentially what it lets you do is analyze your prompt. So, a big part of using any LLM is how well are you asking questions of the tool, right? And so this prompt coach really helps you. You can put in a prompt that, say you didn't get the feedback you wanted or you didn't really feel like it worked very well. You can say, hey, can you analyze this and give me some suggestions? And it'll go through and it'll come back and it'll write you a better prompt that it thinks might work better. And then finally, just real quickly, I just wanted to show the Create app. So this is within Copilot, but it basically lets you create a number of different tools, create images, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, videos, infographics, and more. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the Create app within the Microsoft 365 Copilot, I highly recommend that. Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks so much. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. And I know there's some questions in the Q&A already, Tim, so you could take a look at that whenever you have time, and we'll try to address those. If we haven't, we'll address them at the Q&A discussion part at the end of the presentation. So Nick, you're up. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Connor, and good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Steinkamp. I am with Academic Technology Applications, and today we're going to go over Zoom and some of the AI features that you may or may not be aware of and kind of do a deeper dive. Is everyone seeing the slides here? Let me see. Yep. All right. So I put together this slideshow, but we're going to do a lot of demonstrations kind of throughout this presentation here. But mainly what we're going to cover today is how to access smart recordings, or how to access then smart recordings, the AI companion in meeting chat, And then we're going to spend a lot of time on meeting summary. That's for the meeting summary templates, voice recorder, which is the mobile version, essentially, of creating an ad hoc meeting summary, and then how to interact with the meeting summary using Zoom's AI companion. Zoom brands their AI as AI companion, so you may hear me say AIC or for AI companion. A few kind of housekeeping things here. So first off, Zoom is available for all students, faculty, and staff at CU Boulder. Data level is it's approved for confidential data, levels 2 and 3. And Zoom does not use any of our audio, video, chat, screen sharings, attachments, or other things to train Zoom or other third-party AI models. The integrations with Zoom are, for CU Boulder, we have it integrated with the Google Suite and Microsoft O365. So the main use cases here. So we use Zoom all over the place. We use Zoom for teaching and learning. We use it for administrative tasks. Obviously, for teaching and learning, you can use it to record your class, kind of a lecture capture solution. Obviously, hybrid online courses, office hours, study sessions, work groups. Obviously, administrative things we can use it for is team meetings, one-on-one meetings, webinars like this. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but the basic things, how to access. We can access it from the web portal or the desktop client. I'm going to show you real quick the web portal. We go to cuboulder.zoom.us, log in with identity key, then we're in. The desktop client is recommended as well. For those of you who don't have it, I'd recommend downloading that. And then, so I'm going to show you kind of where the AI things are in each of these areas real quick for kind of the access section. So this is the web. We have our AI companion right here. Click that, opens up a new tab. This is going to look kind of similar to what Tim was just showing you with Copilot. So this is kind of the general how you chat on the web with the AI companion. You can ask it about previous meetings, your calendar, things like that. You can also then go down to the meeting summaries or the recording transcripts. And from there, you can click on one of the meetings to pop it out and see the AI features. The preferred way, and this is a new feature, is Zoom's Hub. Zoom's Hub is essentially a centralized location where all of our content is stored. That's going to be meeting summaries, the recordings, cloud recordings, transcripts, all that fun stuff. So that's how to get to that. If I click through that too quick, it's just on the web portal, Hub. And I will show you that quickly here on the app as well. So this is the desktop app. There's Hub here, and it's going to look the same. They made the layout the same for the web version and the desktop. All right, next slide, moving on. So smart recordings. We've all used Zoom. Well, maybe, I don't want to assume, but so Zoom has smart recordings. Essentially what this lets you do is smart chaptering. It breaks your recordings down into segments for topics, highlights key moments for quick review. There's searchable transcripts, so you can search in the transcript to say, I'm looking for the word mitochondria, and then you can click on that. It'll go to that section in the Zoom recording from where it was timestamped. And then meeting summary. Obviously, this is the thing that we're going to get into towards the end of the presentation, but it's the high-level, concise overview that you can search and interact with the AI companion. So I'm going to pop out to a demo of smart recording. So this is a meeting I had earlier. So here's the transcript we can search. I don't know, let's search for LTI. All right, just jump to that section of the recording, 28 minutes in. This is where we started talking about LTIs. Here's the summary. Here's the smart chapters. The host can edit the smart chapters before sharing it out with the students or other faculty staff members. And then there's a meeting coach, which I think is kind of cool. Kind of shows you how fast you talked, how long you kind of talked uninterrupted, filler words like and things like that. talking speed, which I'm probably guilty of right now, kind of zooming along, so I didn't do so good here, 177 words per minute. And then patience is kind of your gaps between talking. So you can see that for yourself and the other folks who joined your meeting. The recording summary also gives you kind of the next steps if it's a one-on-one sort of meeting to say, hey, here's the things we talked about and here's who they were assigned to. And yeah, that's a quick overview of meeting summary. Oh, I'm sorry, not meeting summary, smart recordings. So smart or AI companion in meeting questions. We actually have that today. So if y'all are interacting with the Zoom webinar, up in the top right corner, there's that little star with another little star above it. Click on that. It'll open up your AI companion chat here in this webinar. This is where you can ask it things like, catch me up. What did I miss? I joined late. What did Tim talk about with Copilot? And we can kind of just ask it general questions like that, and it'll catch us up on things we may have missed. It bases this off of the meeting transcript. Important to know, it's only viewable to you, so whatever you type in there, nobody else sees it. Nobody else sees the responses. It's private just for you. All right, moving on then. I hope everyone's going to still pay attention and not playing with the in-meeting chat too much. But meeting summary, this is the big one that we spend most of our time with. This is, it's going to provide an overview of the key points of a meeting, any action items, who they're going to be assigned to based on who is speaking. The templates is a big one that I think most folks probably don't know about. We can customize and dynamically change the kind of template used to generate these meeting summaries. So it could be a lecture. So we want to have that in kind of an academic lecture format, office hours, one-on-ones, team meetings, and the format of the summary and the details it includes will change based on that. You can also automatically share the summaries to the meeting participants. And then the host obviously has all control to edit the summaries or not share or change the visibility of different aspects of that. So let's jump into a meeting summary. For ease of use today, I'm going to stay in the web portal just since I know we all have access to that and folks might not be downloading the desktop client right now. So in the web portal, if we're looking at some things to do with the meeting summary, but actually, let me finish one more thing here. The voice recorder. I think I touched on this earlier, but the voice recorder is just the same as creating a meeting summary. We just use it on our mobile. It's for iPhone and Androids. It essentially, you can see in the screenshot there's a little button that says record. This is going to be for in-person meetings, or you could even use it in your class to throw it down. Just click record. It's going to provide the same meeting summary, the same transcripts, all the same stuff as the meeting summary from an actual Zoom meeting. You just don't need to schedule a meeting. You don't need to have your laptop open. This is just a mobile run version that you start and stop on your phone, and then it's going to populate into your Zoom hub just like anything else would. So now let's get over to the demo portion. All right, like I said, I'm going to stay in the browser just for ease of use for everyone. So when you click on Zoom Hub, it brings you to your home. These are all your files. You can search for specific things. You can create folders to put your content in spaces that make more sense. I created this demo course called Zoom 3400 here for us today. We've had a couple of class sessions that created the meeting summaries. You can filter by that. These are all the meeting summaries. Here's all the recordings. Here's all the files associated with that class. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the meeting summaries. Actually, first off, we can actually, yes, here we go, back to here. So here's the meeting summary. We can click here to change the template. So obviously I used a lecture summary for this, but here's the kinds of template summaries you can use. Zoom provided this little preview template. It'll give you an example of what it might look like if you changed the template to any of these. So we're going to stay with lecture summary, and you can change this as many times as you want. It'll just auto regenerate the meeting summary. Down here, we've got our AI companion star. So we can click on that and that'll just open up this query. We can ask it anything. So this is a class that I had. So let's say I want to, what were the main topics? What were the main topics? So it's going to look through the last two courses here. Those are the data sources that were selected, and it's going to give us a breakdown of the main topics, right? That's what we expect. So students can use this as well. You could say, like, flashcards for studying. So these are just kind of some examples. You can do any of the main stuff we all do with AI these days. As the instructor, you could say review the last 2, 3, 4 lectures and generate a quiz. Make it a multiple choice quiz. Make a 5-question multiple choice quiz. Anyway, these are all just some examples. You can query it with whatever you'd like. The things that I did want to kind of outline here are the data that it's using. So if we just go back to here and go to AI Companion, this is just the general. I didn't launch it from. So from Hub, I launched it from a specific meeting in question. From here, you can just go to AI Companion and you can ask it to, well, you can manually add the data sources if you'd like from your meetings or your Zoom docs, Google Drive, OneDrive. So I'm going to just select all of my meetings for this this course as my sources. And again, you just ask it main topics, key points. So these are just kind of the different ways to access it. From the general kind of AI chat here, you can ask it more general questions. You could ask it about what do I have on my calendar coming up next week? What were the things I need to talk about with my supervisor? Things like that, or instructor, whoever it might be. So that is the quick rundown of where and how to access it. Again, we're looking at AI Companion here, and then Hub. Hub's your central location for all your files. Now, we also have Zoom integrated with Canvas, so I wanted to show everyone that really quickly as well. Here's my Zoom demo course. Zoom is by default enabled for all the courses we have, so you just click on that. And you can schedule your meetings through here if you'd like. Also, if you've scheduled one outside of Canvas and you wanted to bring it in, you can click on these dots here, import a meeting, put in that 10-digit meeting identifier, and it will import a meeting that you scheduled outside of Canvas and bring it into here. The reason why you might do that is you want to share the cloud recordings with the students. So as soon as you run a meeting, if you're using the cloud recordings and the AI meeting summaries, they're going to show up on these tabs for both you and the students. The options here are to publish them all by default, the same for meeting summary, or you can have that turned off and you can go through one by one and say, actually, that class didn't go so well. I don't want to publish the recording or the meeting summary for that. But yeah, that's going to be essentially how you can interact with it from Canvas, how the students can see it from within Canvas as well, and the functionality that we just talked about with interacting with your summaries and stuff is still there. So let's go back to the slideshow. Oh, that's questions. All right, I did zoom through that as I expected with my fast words per minute. But yeah, I think I just wanted to spend a little time just bringing to light those features. The main ones are the voice recorder on the mobile phone, changing the templates for AI summary, how to access the things through the web or the desktop client, I'll show that again real quick on the client. It's just you can go to Hub or your AI down here and ask it any of those same questions we were just asking through the web. So that is going to be it. I'm going to pass it along, but again, I'm happy to do a deeper dive into these and kind of spend some more time looking at each of those features, but I just wanted to bring them up so people have kind of a general idea of what Zoom is, what it can be used for, and the AI features. So I'll pass it off to you. Thanks, Connor.
Thanks, Nick. That was really helpful. I feel like I try to keep up on our tools and their functionalities, and I still only knew about half of those functionalities. So that's good to see. And obviously, more features are being added and changed every day for a lot of these tools. So I'm going to pivot really quickly to Google's NotebookLM, and I'll be chatting about this. I'll do a very quick demo, but I'll try to keep us moving along for the sake of time. But for those of you, at least on the CU Boulder campus, you have NotebookLM available to you. I know that this is a tool that's gotten a lot of hype and excitement for use on our campus by faculty, staff, and students. NotebookLM is a great tool to interact with specific files and documents. There's an acronym that kind of stands for when you attach a file to an AI tool. It's RAG. It's Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what that means is you're giving a large language model or a generative AI tool a specific file to interact with, and it weights the responses that it gives on the files that you're giving it. And that's really the core functionality of NotebookLM. I do want to note that if you are at CU Boulder specifically, you can use NotebookLM with your CU credentials, and it is approved for use with public data only. So not confidential data like Zoom and Copilot were. Gemini and NotebookLM, which are two Google products, are public data only. You can log in by going to notebooklm.google.com, and you can log in using your CU credentials. And the tool, as I'll show you, can create a number of different media outputs, and that includes podcasts, video summaries, infographics, mind maps, flashcards, etc. And I'll show you that when I do a screen share here in 1 second. You can share notebooks, but one thing I wanted to highlight is as a challenge that we've heard from faculty is you have to share the notebooks that you create on an individual basis. So you can't do like what you might be used to with like a Google Doc or a slide deck or something like that, where you send a whole link out to a group of people. You have to add folks individually to a NotebookLM, at least currently. But like I said, features and settings change often. And on that note, features may be added and removed with little notice. We do have new features being added all the time, but because CU Boulder doesn't have a paid enterprise contract with Google, these are features and functionalities that Google offer to educational institutions for free. And so because of that, we also are not contractually guaranteed to have access to certain features and functionalities long term. So unfortunately, we are at the discretion of Google for what kind of features that we can offer. And so if you see a change, unfortunately, there's only so much we could do about that on our end. So let me do a screen share swap here to do a live demo. And I'll count on one of my co-hosts to give a shout if there's anything that's not working with the screen share. But I just wanted to show, if you all aren't familiar with NotebookLM, I wanted to show you what it looks like so that way you can get a feeling for how it works. There's really 3 bars here on this dashboard. On the left here are sources. And like I said, this is a RAG tool. So what you're doing is you're giving the tool sources, files, or documents for it to interact with. And so you'll see I already have this pre-populated. This is an example notebook on information literacy versus AI literacy versus digital literacy. So I already have a bunch of sources, but if you were to add a source, it's really intuitive. You can either search the web for sources or you can drop in a file. Again, for CU Boulder, public data only. So if you're uploading a file, make sure it's not confidential data or any kind of student for protected data. But you can also search for new sources here as well, and you can add them in. Last I checked, the limit of sources to include in a notebook is 50 files. However, my rule of thumb is to try to go more towards the 10 to 12 sources, because even though you can upload 50 documents, especially on wide-ranging topics like this, you'll start having conflicting information, and you could start pulling different information out of these sources to confuse the tool. And so I try to limit it to 10 to 12 sources that are really vetted and they're things that I trust or I've already reviewed and I know that they're reputable. And so you can add these sources here on the left, and then you can even add and remove them with these check marks. So these are your sources that the tool is interacting with. And then the middle column here, labeled chat, is where you can chat with NotebookLM about the sources. And so you can see I've asked it some questions and interacted with it, and you can get some really great information here. And it does cite the sources, and so you can find the exact source that it's pulling it from on your left if you want to dig deeper. And you can continue to ask it questions and so on and so forth. And then you could save these outputs if you want by saving to note here on the left. And then really the exciting thing with NotebookLM, or at least the reason why people like using it, is because of the studio feature on the right. So this is a functionality that changes pretty often. The audio overview is that podcast functionality that I was talking about. So you have your sources on the left, you can chat with it, or you can have it create a podcast. The podcasts are the same two voices almost every time. You can change what you want it to focus on. It tends to be about a 15 to 20-minute podcast. The thing that I love creating these for is I'll download if I'm trying to learn about a new subject, I'll download this audio overview and then I can listen to it in the car just like I would any other podcast on my way to work, and then have it really curated on a specific set of resources. So it helps me kind of get an overview of the topic. But you can see here that there's a lot of different formats you can make: slide deck, video overview, mind map, etc. And then when you ask it to create it, this is your saved created studio files. And so let's see if I can live demo this. I'm not going to play it because I don't want to risk the audio issues, but this is a video overview. So it's like taking that podcast, but turning it into a short form video. You can see here, it's about a 6-minute video. I have flashcards here where it asks a question, and then you can hit see answer and go to the next. You can go to, and you can have it create mind maps. So by topic, by topic, it's expanding and it's going into deeper, related areas of learning. Let's see here. This is a podcast overview, so I won't play that for you. And then this is an infographic, which is a very new feature. I think this was added within like the last month or so. You could have it create infographics based on the sources of information you gave it on the left. And one thing I wanted to note on the infographic, and this is true for really all the media pretty much, but when you go to create the infographic, you can specify what level of detail you want. So that example I showed you was concise, but it can include more information, more words and details. You have different format or orientation options here, and then you can specifically tell it to focus on one aspect of the sources that you're giving it. And so you can hone it in on a very specific thing that you're trying to create. So there's a lot of different media that you can create here. I did want to, before wrapping this up, I did want to mention 2 caveats. One is, even though you have all the sources of information here on the left, it's important to recognize that just because you're creating a notebook on this and you're interacting with it doesn't mean that you now fully know all of the information from your documents on the left. If this is an important area where you're expected to know a lot about a subject, this is a great way to get started and to get caught up. But it's impossible for a tool to fully help you understand a really nuanced or intricate topic. So, of course, we still recommend that you go into these and find the information and the evidence that backs, your understanding yourself here after kind of getting an overview. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention here was a question that we got in chat, about energy use for these AI tools. One thing to note is that this studio element here requires a lot more energy and power to create these media than it does for anything like this chat interface in the middle. The numbers can vary widely depending on what you're doing with your chat versus media generation, but you can consider image generation to take at least 10 times the amount of power and energy that a chat prompt would take. And then something like video or audio could take another 10 times. And so, when I'm mentioning that you can create these things, one thing to keep in mind is that this is much more energy intensive. So be more sparing with it. Make sure that you're not just iterating over and over and requesting small changes and creating 10 different video overviews, because that does take substantially more energy than your chat prompts would. So do with that what you will, and I just wanted to share that information to make sure that you are all aware of the energy use. So I will wrap up NotebookLM for now and pass to, I believe, Joel to talk about Gemini.
Thank you, Connor. Let me get my slides up here. All right, does that look good for everybody?
Yep.
Cool, great. Yeah, let me get started. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm gonna go just really brief, high-level overview of Google Gemini at CU. It's gonna be a lot of similarities with NotebookLM that Connor just talked about because they are in the same ecosystem. But first off, it's available to all currently affiliated staff, faculty, and students at CU, and that is available at no cost due to our Google Workspace for Education license that we have with Google. Gemini is Google's LLM, and it's very similar to the Copilot chat that Tim talked about. It's also similar to ChatGPT if you've used that and are familiar with that. Um, the the reasons why you might want to choose Gemini over the other options we've talked about, it's going to be a personal preference. If you're comfortable with Google and that ecosystem and environment, you might prefer Google Gemini. The one caveat with that, and that's something that Connor went over with NotebookLM, is Google Gemini also is only approved for use with public data. So if you need to use it for confidential data, you'll want to use Copilot Chat or Zoom or one of the other options that are approved for that. The way that you get to it, you can go directly to gemini.google.com and log in with your CU credentials. If you're already logged in to Drive on the web interface, you can go to the launcher in the top right and get to Gemini from there as well. One thing to note here is if you have a personal Google account that you're logged into in your browser, I would recommend logging out of that or even trying opening a different browser just to make sure that you're actually logging into your CU Google account. The reason for that is if you're logged into your CU Google account, because of our agreement with Google, they are not allowed to use any of the data for ads or for model training. So that's a really nice protection that we get. So that's a reason to make sure you're in your CU Google account and not a personal one that you might have. This Google Gemini at CU has access to Gemini 3.1 fast thinking and pro models, as well as image generation. Connor mentioned how things change so quickly. Just in the time it took me to work on this presentation, they released Gemini 3.1. It was Gemini 3 for a while. So yeah, just as you go to use these tools, they're going to change a lot, and that's something to look out for. So next slide. All right, this is what the Google Gemini interface looks like when you get logged in. You'll see here in the middle of the screen is where you can start a new chat and enter your prompts. If you look just a little bit to the right and down, there's a little arrow that says fast. That's where you can actually change between the 3 different models. You can just drop that down and select which one you want to use for this specific chat. Also in this prompt window on the left is the tools button. If you click that, that's how you can get to the image generation feature and also the deep research. Once you create these chats, on the left-hand side, you can see it listed here. When you create new chats, they'll actually save those for you and you can rename them. That's really helpful. It'll keep all of the information that you had in the chat so you can go back to it later and save time and just pick up where you left off. Just above chats is the Gems feature. Gems is really similar to the Copilot chat has agents, and ChatGPT has custom GPTs. They're real similar. They're just custom versions of Gemini that you can use to help you with repetitive tasks. If you click on the little arrow next to the gems here, Google actually has some pre-populated gems that you can use. They might work great for you out of the box. You could also edit the ones that they have and save versions for yourself. You can also actually create your own custom gems if you've got repetitive tasks that you do a lot, and those people find those really helpful. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Like I said, just a really brief overview, and I'll send it back to Connor.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. And Shane, if you want to wrap things up by talking about what we know about ChatGPT EDU so far, and then we'll shift to discussion after that.
Yeah, will do. All right, so CU announced ChatGPT was coming to faculty, staff, and students, I believe, on February 10th. So we're not quite a month into this yet. And on the technical side, we're still kind of going through the implementation phase and making sure that everything's talking to each other, and we're figuring out the provisioning flow. What we do know is there will be a broad launch on March 31st for those users. Again, eligible faculty, students, and staff will have access to GPT 5.2, assuming there isn't a new one released between now and then, but that's the latest that we have. You'll have access to projects, GPT creation, for your personal use. There will be access to image creation, but it's going to be limited to just a few per day, and same with deep research at launch. As we move out from launch and get some of our infrastructure in place to start handling some of the more advanced features they're going to be using, I can't remember if ChatGPT calls them tokens or credits. Every LLM seems to flip back and forth. But as you get into more advanced features where you're starting to use those, we're hoping to be able to release deep reasoning and pro model access in the coming months. Publishing of GPTs. So again, at launch, you can create your own, but being able to publish those for uses within the CU environment for classes or projects or things like that. We're hoping to get that. Codex as well. This is a great coding tool for those of you that are integrated with GitHub or doing any sort of coding. And then app connectors, so connecting to Office data, so anything through Microsoft Graph, whether that's files, site collections, your email, calendar, those type of things. There's some other app connections outside of Microsoft as well that we'll be looking at, but just expect it to take us another month or two before we're ready for those. We are hoping to have and working on right now to get up to confidential data approved for use within ChatGPT. In our testing, we've only been doing public, but we're going through all the motions for approval and confidential. An important thing here, this is an opt-in model. So while we have CU as a system as purchase licenses, we aren't forcing anyone into the environment. If they want to participate and use the tool within the CU EDU tenant, they first have to take a real quick Percipio training at Skillsoft, and that's supplied by the system. That'll be available to both students and faculty and staff. Upon completing that, it'll kick off a provisioning flow where the users will receive an email invite to the environment. We know that there are a few thousand accounts out there where people already signed up with ChatGPT with their colorado.edu account. For those folks, if they do take the training and do opt in, their invite's a little bit different. It'll ask them if they want to migrate their current colorado.edu account into the ChatGPT for EDU tenant, or if they want to export it to their public, or if they don't opt in, then they can continue on using their current version, although it would be the free version. So they wouldn't have the data protections, and in that case, they shouldn't be using CU data within that model. Yeah, that's the real quick where we're at right now. Expect a lot more information to come out over the next couple of months. We do have a few sites out there, FAQs, things like that available, but we're continuing to update those as new information becomes available. All right, Connor, back to you.
Great. I think Shane is our last of the presentations we have scheduled. So I think, Jason, it's up to you now to shift us into Q&A.
Yeah, so to kick off the Q&A, so first of all, let me say I'm Jason Armbruster, working at the University of Colorado. Glad to help everybody here. I'm going to launch a poll first, so hopefully everybody can see the poll there. We're really looking for where are you interested in maybe a deeper dive on any of these tools. So you should be able to select more than one, and I'll give you all a few minutes to start to fill out your poll there, and then we'll jump into some Q&A. Take a look there. So looks like we've got a lot of interest in Copilot, certainly a lot of interest in ChatGPT. maybe some more in NotebookLM as well. So we can definitely use that information to think about what we might present in the future and doing some more deep dives. So thank you all for that information. Beyond that, if you didn't notice, our presenters have been answering most of the Q&A in the Q&A pod. So take a look at the written answers there. If you don't know how to get there, again, you should either see Q&A at the bottom of your window, or if not, go to the 3 dots under More and then select Q&A. You should see all the questions that have been answered there already. I'm going to go through the ones that aren't answered, and then we'll kind of see what time we have from there. So for the first one, Connor, this is probably for you. So when we think about all these AI tools, is the AI access to data sources limited to read only?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we're covering 5 different platforms here with very widely ranging functionalities. So I don't think I could answer that statement as a blanket statement, especially we're still learning more about ChatGPT EDU for our campus specifically. I would say the vast majority would be read only, and these are generative AI tools generally speaking, and so they are generating new content, but it is seldom, if ever, something that's actually changing the data that you're working with. Usually it's creating an alternative or a new file. So talking about the Zoom AI companion creating transcripts and notes and Copilot doing the same, those are creating new artifacts, not adjusting or editing the data that we have. However, I can't say definitively that everything is 100% read-only, but it's definitely near the case, I'd say. And any of my other panelists can correct me if you know differently.
No, you're going to be correct. The only one I can think that's writing within your documents would be Copilot, where you have it open within the document. So the N365 license, you're actually co-authoring with it to change a document. It's not going out and accessing previously created documents and making those changes. Some prompts where you're creating new output and creating new Excel files, it will write those files for you. But again, it's not going out and changing other data. ChatGPT, for sure, when you use the connectors, those are all read-only. Those are not. So you give it access to your OneDrive, for example, that's a read-only access. It's also delegated access, so it's access to what you have access to. I'm sorry, permission to have access, read-only to what you have access to.
All right, great. Let's maybe jump to the next question. I think I'm going to combine a couple here. So a couple of people that ask kind of, is there anything we can say as far as best use cases for the different tools that we presented? Is it mostly personal preference? Is there a benefit of one over the other?
Yeah, I can start to answer that question, and then the colleagues can hop in as well. I think the use case for each of these depends on what you're trying to do. Of course, when we talk about Zoom, the best use cases there are where you already have a meeting for it, or of course there was that functionality that Nick showed us where it can transcribe a live meeting if that's something that you need. But of course, if you're already working in Zoom for a meeting and then you want to interact with the topics that were discussed there, Zoom is the great option there. As far as Copilot versus Gemini, which are both more or less general LLMs, Copilot is the one, first of all, that's approved with confidential data. So if your use case involves confidential data, of course, we recommend you use the tool that's approved for that. As well as Copilot has access to more of your O365 apps and data. So if it's something where you're using a Word document or Outlook, email, etc., there's great capabilities that are built in there. As far as just using Copilot Chat, which is primarily powered by the OpenAI models, between that and Gemini, a lot of that comes down to preference. And as far as ChatGPT, when EDU, when that's available, we anticipate that that'll be approved for use with confidential CU data. In which case that would be another option depending on the data that you're using. But there could be different models as well. And so part of it could be if you have a specific model in mind that you want to use out of personal preference. So hopefully that addresses the nature of the question, but of course, anybody else should hop in as well.
Okay, I will keep moving, but if anybody else wants to jump in, interrupt me, please. Okay, so next question, Connor, I think this one's probably for you. Can you briefly speak to Claude Code and if it is okay for use, especially considering Anthropic models are now becoming available in Copilot?
Yes, I could try to address that. And one thing to note, I think, and Tim, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, because Anthropic is now becoming an option within Copilot to use, doesn't mean that you can use Anthropic through your own personal web portal and it has the same protections. Using Anthropic models within Copilot is different than accessing an Anthropic tool on your own personal account. And so that could be really confusing. But if you're logged into Copilot and you have that enterprise data protection, that's when you know that you can use the tools regardless of if it's OpenAI or Claude with that kind of CU data. As far as using Claude Code, which is a very different tool than the average Copilot functionalities, if that's something that you need or want to use for your work, we would treat that the same way we treat any of the niche and specific AI tools on campus, which is we have a process to request access and approval for use within your specific context-dependent situation. I'll try to share a link in the chat where we have a little bit more information about how to request approval for those. But whether it's Claude Code or any other niche AI tool, or honestly any other IT software or IT tool outside of AI functionality, we have a process where our IT security and accessibility teams will review the request, and depending on your use case, your data, your audience, what you need to use the tool for, you can receive approval for yourself individually to use tools if they can be approved. And so, of course, for Claude Code, that's something that we would suggest going through what's called the ICT review process.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing there, Connor. You know, the model that's being rolled out to some Microsoft products, the only one we've seen it in so far is Excel. So you can use an agent within Excel with a file open. And that drop down I showed you all earlier where you see you could choose GPT-5.2. It's just going to have Claude Opus as an additional model. And so this is all rolling out, it's changing a lot, but that's kind of the only place we're seeing it. So Cloud Code is not an option within the Microsoft 365 tools.
All right. Next question. Does CU allow AI agent use? Any researchers use the AI tools you provided for research workflow improvements?
I can try to address that. So when we talk about agents within generative AI tools, that it can be a very ambiguous term, and so it's a little bit hard to answer in the general sense. For example, Copilot has a whole series of things called agents. But within Gemini, the same thing would be called gems, as Joel pointed out. And within ChatGPT EDU, a similar functionality will be called a custom GPT. So it really depends on what you're referring to. So of course, within Copilot, we have agents that you're welcome to use. Now, if you're talking about agentic AI, where an AI tool is created that can take actions on its own behalf per your request, that's something that we have to be really careful of in terms of the data access that it has. And it's something that we're kind of talking about more as a wide campus is where that can be utilized. But the key concern there is what data these agents, whether it's a Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT or agentic AI, it's always the concern is what kind of data it has access to and making sure that the tool is approved for the data that it can be used with.
All right. Next one, I'm going to grab a couple of these I think that are kind of getting at API access to models. Do we have any options for API access to models? And if so, is there any way to manage charge or cost around this?
Yeah, so when we talk about ChatGPT, that's probably a mid to late summer feature. We're doing this in phases, and it's almost a complete split from when we look at OpenAI, we have the ChatGPT chat version of it, and then we have the API version. So right now we're focusing on the chat version because it's the most visible and usable by folks on our campus. The API version that is token usage, we have to get the infrastructure in the back end to use speed types and monitor token consumption. So there's going to be most likely some sort of quota for tokens and then billing after, but we're still in the we're not sure how that's going to work yet phase, most likely using Azure. But so mid to late summer for that. There is no API for Copilot or Copilot for M65. I'm not sure about Google, but I'm guessing with our license, we don't have anything. Are you aware of anything, Joel?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I would have to check, but there could be like a limited API functionality, but it would have really low limits, and we actually don't have any way to like purchase or bill in the Google Cloud environment currently. So.
And one other resource we have on our campus, at least specifically, and other campuses might have similar, is our Cloud Foundations team. We could try to send a link in the chat as far as a way to work within our secured environments to access commercial vendors' tools. And so, it might not be API access exactly that you're looking for, but it could be something that would fit the need for, the types of requests that are coming in like that. So we'll try to share that in the chat.
Yeah, I just dropped that in there actually, Connor. Thanks for
Awesome.
bringing that up. A little bit more of a question on, I think it's at the API access, but this is about a teaching use case, teaching advanced CS classes where students are building agentic software systems. They use LLMs through APIs and usually consume more tokens to run experiments. Are there any resources we can provide to students so they access the amount of tokens required to build quality agents?
Well, I'm going to have to defer to some folks from the RMACC/NAIR side here on this, but I do know that NAIR has a number of resources for educators to be able to provide access, for educational settings. And so perhaps somebody on the NAIR side could, be able to talk about if that would be a good resource for this specific question. And if not, I think we'll share a link in the chat as well, so that way you can
Yeah, why don't we do that?
look into that.
Okay, time for maybe one more question here. Let me see. I think we're probably going to answer these directly. Eric, I'll take a shot at your question. So I think we can answer these in the Q&A pod. So I'm going to hand back to Casey actually to wrap us up. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We will be following up with some links to resources. And again, thank you to all of our presenters today. We hope this was useful for you, and we will use your feedback to consider topics for future webinars. Thanks again, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey, and to everybody from the RMACC team. Thanks so much for having us.